when the founding member Abdul Basit in setting the right kind of mission, World Humanitarian Drive. What an extraordinary concept it is, bringing dignity to humanity, human prosperity. That's all our collective mission, shared vision. The topic he has asked me to address is quite interesting, connecting humanity and trade, ensuring leadership and governance, how it can add value to sustainable journey. That's the principal set of values. As a banker, as an economist, over 4 decades of professional pursuit, I can tell you that we are in a very defining moment in the world. We are going through an extraordinary set of changes and challenges. Even after 10 years of a financial crisis, it was not confined to specific one sector. It was a human crisis. Humanity was at stake. When the financial economies were creating products and services, engineering to deceive the common man. Financial economies are still converting as real. Real economies are redefining the scope and performance. Communism has changed. Capitalism is altercating its form and substance. Mixed economies are trying to play their role. In 2008, when we recognized global financial crisis was on account of illiquidity, we thought by setting accommodative monetary policy, that is printing money, improving the money supply, improving the liquidity, we can fix the problem. The liquidity crisis moved into a funding crisis. Funding crisis moved into a solvency crisis, and sovereign issue. Even after 10 years, the accommodative monetary policy is still continuing. As we speak, the American administration, the President of the United States is threatening the independence of the Federal Reserve. He wants to demote the technocrat. By printing money, improving the liquidity, the stock market has recovered. The housing market, which was under extraordinary deflation, was recovering. Trillions of dollars were printed. The hard money was transcending borders. It moved from market to market. The stock market was picking up across the globe. Incremental productivity was visibly accommodated with an alignment between the monetary policy and fiscal policy. The monetary policy comes from the central bankers. The fiscal policy comes out of the finance minister. Essentially, they have to align. That's the economic barometer in substance. So even after 10 years, the global growth is still sluggish. Global trade, which was twice of the global GDP, is now less than the GDP. International Monetary Fund, and we all met in last year, annual meeting in Bali, Indonesia, predicted 3.6 to 3.8% could be the global growth for 2019. It was revised downward when we met in Davos in January to 3.5. Now in the spring meeting in April in Washington, it was revised down again to 3.3%. That says it all. Now, advanced economies are still grossly underperforming. The aggregate performance of the advanced economies is confined to 1.8%. The developing economies, what you call emerging economies, are the economic engine of the world. Incrementally, they produce over 60 to 65% of the global productivity. Arguably, they're still performing better and better.
Do you know Wi-Fi here?
Extraordinary set of challenges in aligning in terms of trade. There are contentious issues between the developed world and developing world. We are seeing the deflection. Now, there's a contention in terms of Trump administration. Extraordinary set of tariffs are being levied to China, Mexico, again India now, and EU as well. This has distorted the overall game. The global trade, merchandise trade, is confined to 2.6% according to WTO. While the global growth, as I said, it's now limited to 3.3%. So the global growth is going to be moving from 3.6 to 3.3, and possibly they might move to 3.5 to 3.6% in 2020. Advanced economies, sum total, they are going to be 1.8% in aggregate terms. Topping the list is America, which is said to be recovering, reporting around 2.3% for the year 2018, which is likely to slow down next year to 1.7%. And again, with the Brexit, UK is grossly underperforming to 1.1 to 1.2%, possibly Brexit deal or no deal. Essentially, if we can spell it out in October, it might move for next year 1.4%. EU as an enlarged fraternity, where the monetary policy is centralized, fiscal policy is decentralized, is again a design error. But birth is a deformity. Essentially, they're going to do between 1.3 to 1.4%. That's an aggregation. If America can print money, EU can print money. If EU can print money, Bank of England can print money, and that's precisely Japan did. Abenomics was invented in 2012. 30 years they were under technical recession. They have to weaken the yen to export more and more. And they engaged in 2012, and they started recovering, inflating the economy, and they were achieving their trade targets. Essentially, they're going to do around 1%, possibly next year, 0.5%. That's the developed world. Developing world, in aggregate terms, should be doing around 4.4%. Within the developing world, India is, as a functional democracy, is doing between 7.3 to 7.5%. China should be doing around 6.3%. Russia should be doing 1.6%. Brazil should be around 2.3%. And South Africa should be doing between 1.5 to 1.8%. Middle East, North Africa, Afghanistan, Pakistan put together 1.5% for this year. Possibly they can double next year. So all contingent on how politics and economics is converging in substance. And that's the bottom line. America started imposing tariffs. China retaliated. Now we have the G20 meeting coming up in Osaka, Japan on 28th and 29th. Last week there was a meeting of G20 finance ministers. They couldn't reach any consensus. Of course, the broad consensus were to bring in regulatory alignment for taxation globally. Again, technology companies which are exponential in substance, they are not location-centric, how to tax them, and bring in sustainable development goals to the overall phrase. If you look at the bigger picture in terms of sustainability, global sustainability, trade plays a big role. Elimination of extreme poverty, gender equality, universal health care, universal education, clean air, hygiene, clean water, reducing the income inequalities, ensuring you have smart cities or infrastructure created, trillions of dollars are required. And again, marine need to be conserved. Above the land and below the sea again, we have to necessarily make sure the natural resources need to be conserved, preserved, and ensure long-term sustenance comes in. How do we build a global partnership? How do we ensure rising temperature, increasing level, animal extinction, carbon emission? How to create a carbon neutral society so that we can contain the global warming and climate change to moderate level. Less than 2% we can bring it down. It means you have trillions of dollars needs to be put in place. Over 6.9 trillion is required according to World Bank, essentially to reignite the mapping process required to reduce the carbon emission, to move away from the fossil fuels. By investing from now to 2030, 6.9 trillion, perhaps every year we can save fossil fuel to the extent of 1.7 trillion. But
Sustainable development agenda will not have its meaning unless the trade comes to prospects. How do you eliminate extreme poverty? How do you ensure food security? How do you ensure smart agriculture comes in? How do we put out the poverty and zero hunger? How do we bring in? Unless you have a free trade comes in prospects. Duty-free trade comes in prospect. Tariff-free trade comes in prospects. How do we ensure developing world and developing world are come to terms in consensus, not in contentions? These are not ordinary issues. We have to come to terms to recognize all these issues. A smart gender equality, how it will come? Unless we educate women more and more. On-site, off-site, you have to bring in more and more distance education. Today, you are not location-centric. You are information-centric. You are not product-centric. You are anytime, anywhere-centric. If that is the case, we have to come to terms to recognize these changes required in digital governance that is financially inclusive in substance. You have to understand, financial inclusion is not an ordinary issue. Last 4 years, we have been talking in the International Monetary Fund, countries like India, where they brought in over 300 million people under the financial inclusion. Every individual in this planet should have a bank account. Everyone should be having digital advantage. If you connect, then connectivity in terms of gender equality is possible. You will have additional education possible. Financial literacy is possible. Inclusion, financial inclusion is the name of the game. The econometrics is not confined to economics alone. It is economics in substance. When I was doing my second PhD, it was confined to green banking. The suggestion which I have made over the years is to recognize the risk-weighted capital of the financial institutions in global terms needs to be invested. A portion of the risk-weighted capital should be invested by the financial institutions, either lending or investments, for sustainable projects. It could be water management, it could be waste management, it could be recycling, it could be solar, it could be biomass, it could be biofuel. We have to invest more and more to ensure we bring in value streaming so that we reduce the carbon emission. This is not charity per se. This is a dignified attempt to make sure you run a profit-making mechanism which is commercially viable, absolutely viable. Institutions like us, where I run this institution over the last 17 years, where we have promoted where there is a maximum per capita emission. 45% of the world oil, 20-25% of the world gas come from the Gulf states, where we advocated as an institution. We advocated green banking. So green banking is confined to a portion of the risk-weighted shareholders' money should be allocated for renewable purpose, sustainable purpose. So it is important. Sustainable development agenda is interconnected to the global trade. And again, a 5% digital access can bring in 130 megatons of carbon emission reduction. It equal to over 468 coal plants, which you can shut it down. Imagine the scale at which you can bring in value streaming, how you can create clean air, hygiene, water management. So conservation in terms of what will come out of digital access. And again, what we need to articulate is, while G20, when I talked about 80-85% of the global productivity come from this G20, we also should understand 80 to 85% of the carbon emission also comes from the same set of countries. So they have to recognize the challenges. Nearly 27% of the global carbon emissions come from China. 15% of the carbon emission comes from the United States. 10% of the total carbon emission comes from the EU. 7% come from India. These countries are now progressive and productive, and they have to offset by creating carbon neutral society. And we all have to play a role. And that's what the message is all about. Trade is interconnected. Banking is interconnected. Investment is interconnected. This is not a philanthropy or charity alone. This is making money for a right cost by the right means. And that's what precisely we need to articulate in the younger minds. That is precisely the reason why me as an individual, we as a team can collectively respond to these challenges. I come from very, very challenging circumstances. In fact, Abdul Basit was asking me to say a few words about my corporate history. This is interconnected in substance. Unless you are a good person, you cannot create good society. A group of good society can create good nations. When a group of good nations comes together, it becomes United Nations. It is not one way or other. So these are interconnected in the journey. Where there is righteousness in your heart, there is beauty in your character. When there is beauty in your character, there is order in the home. When there is order in the home, there is order in the nation. When there is order in the nation, there is peace in the world. Your heart becomes action. Your action becomes your habits. Your habit becomes your character. Your character becomes your destiny. Not other way around. Unless you have a long-term vision, you as a person, we as a team, we cannot bring in human prosperity or human dignity. It's like, if you have a short-term goal, you cultivate flowers. If you have a medium-term goals, you cultivate trees. If you have a long-term vision, long-term goal, you build humanity, and that is eternity. And that is what is important. The biggest discovery this century has given us, we as human beings can alter our life by altering our attitude, and a sheer attitude of gratitude to this planet. How can we forget our children and grandchildren are going to be enduring in this planet? Why should we ignore such a phenomenon? So transformation in our daily walk of life is not an issue. You have to change it for good. And that's precisely, we have to pursue and persistent. There's nothing but persistence required in this defining moment. Politics and economics is not converging in total terms. Many of us are playing to the audience. That's not what is required. A true reflection of your character. If you are asked my personal life history, my father was earning less than 75 rupees. He was giving me 30 rupees for my education. 30 rupees. 1/3. We're a family of 4 children. And the parents have to maintain their home. Education was the major focus. That is the drive which helped me. Today, the biggest gift I give to everyone is to keep learning at the age of 60 and keep giving it back as a gift. The rest of the financial material wealth I can always share, which I'm doing 1/3 of my earnings through my charity foundation, S Family Foundation. Issue reminds, integration of your heart and mind is eternal. Integration of your heart and mind is eternal. That is nothing but your consciousness. And persistence comes out of drive and determination of this consciousness. There are educated derelicts, we are seeing. There are unrewarded genius, we are seeing. There are talented people who are not recognized, we are seeing. What is omnipotent is love, and sheer love that is omnipresent, omnipotent. The drive and determination to have love people, love the society, love everyone. We love everyone, we like everyone, everything is interesting, every day is interesting, every day is inspirational, every day is motivational, every day is making incremental value, and you excel your own set standard. And that's what matters when it comes to it. Now, I'll tell you a story when I conclude my keynote speech. When I was getting the 30 rupees from my father, I was telling you a few minutes before. I was going to a school 10 kilometers away from my village. And even 30 rupees was not enough because I had to catch the bus, which cost me nearly 18 to 20 rupees per month. Plus I have to subsidize for the books and the rest of the alignment required. My first 3 months I recognized my mother was selling her drugs. After 6 months, she has to sell her whatever that is left out in the house. I went to my headmaster. I went and told my headmaster, I cannot take it anymore. I will not come from next year. I'll complete the education for this year. I was doing 8th standard. He said, fine. Don't worry about it. You have to come first in all the classes now. You are left with few more exams. You complete the exams. And let me see whether I can get you a free admission in a hostel, which is nearby.
Excellent.
So, was prepared very well actually. I wrote all the exams. The last day was my test to my test. 8:30 I used to go to the bus stop. 9 I used to get the bus. 9:30 I used to be in my town. And 10 o'clock I used to be in the school. On the day, fateful day, the bus was not there.
Oh, no.
8:30, 8:45, 9, 9:30. I was shivering. I went to the neighbor and asked him, what happened? Why there is no bus? He says, you don't know? There's a breakdown. Today there's no bus. How can I go to the exams? I said, what? 10 kilometers away, how are you going to do? I went to my home. I took my father's cycle. I told my mother I'm driving the cycle of my father. I went 2 kilometers, the cycle got punctured. Just 2 kilometers. There was a tea stall and there was a small pond. And I kept the cycle as it is, thrown on the road. And I was taking my school book. 8 kilometers, I didn't have watch, even today I wear a Rolex. I didn't have any clue about what time I'll be reaching. I was running 10 kilometers carrying the big baggage. I reached, I didn't know it was within the standard time. When I reached there, I was crying in front of the invigilator, who was my school master. He said, allow me in. He looked at the watch, it was 10:25. You're on time. You're on time. Get in. Calm down.
Amazing.
What happened? This is what exactly happened. Then I told him the full story. He said, okay, calm down. He gave me water. He gave me water and then he gave me the question paper. 10:30 I took the question paper, max exam. 11:30 I gave him the answer paper. He looked at it and he was crying. Because all the answers were right. Within 1 hour. The full paper was answered which was read for 3 hours. That's a drive, that's a determination, something to respond to the parents who are working hard for me. I realized I am nothing but flesh and bone. My parents are required. If you understand the dynamics of your personality, you are only a router. You're only carrying the essence of your parents. And everything is a reflection of your parents. The Karma 3 theory will never leave your address. What you get is what exactly you plant in this planet. Not next, not before. You get what you want, you plant it now. That's what the seed is. So what you need to articulate, to be conscious, as long as the world exists, good and evil exist. It is you to choose. Good to convert yourself. Even negative energy, turn it into positive. Convert all negative into positive. There has to be an auto-resilience to become positive and productive and constructive and socially conscious. And everything becomes easy. Everything is loving. Everything is caring. Every day is interesting. Every day is inspirational. Every day is motivating.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, distinguished guests, and you're all very distinguished in your own particular ways, and that distinction is no different from our very important panel this afternoon. My name is Keith Best, and I'm the chair of the Universal Peace Federation UK, but I want to follow in David, my predecessor, chair, some path and pay a particular tribute, and I know I do this very much on your behalf, to Abdul Basit Syed for having brought us all together. What a tremendous achievement. And, you know, Abdul is indefatigable. He knows no bounds to his energy, to his enthusiasm, and it's infectious. Every time I meet him, I go away feeling infused more for the cause. So, Abdul, thank you for your personal encouragement and for everything that you've done here. The theme is the same as before. It is very much about investment and world peace, and investment being a vehicle for world peace. And when you think about it, we are all investors, even if we don't think of ourselves as such. If anybody's got a pension, if anybody pays taxes, some people may have a few shares. They're investors in the traditional sense. But we're also all investors, as we heard so elegantly this morning, investors in our own community. The fact that we participate in our place of work or our community means that we are investing. We're investing our time and effort. And when we come to international trade, it is a major vehicle, potentially, for world peace. It is also, as we've seen through the centuries of history, a vehicle for war, for aggrandizement, for colonization, for all sorts of difficulties that are the legacy of untrammeled trade. And when I hear, and I won't mention any names, but a certain leader of the Western world talking about winning trade wars, I feel very uncomfortable, because you don't win a trade war. It means if you are aggrandizing your own country's benefit, you're doing it at the demerit and the disadvantage of somebody else. That is not my idea of humanity being one and actually trying to work together with one another. And the reality is, we know that trade wars, and it's indicative that they are described as wars, not trade disputes, but trade wars. And they are the precursor to something far, far worse if they are not resolved at an early stage. I know very many of us are looking forward, I hope looking forward, to the G20 summit next week in Japan, and the prospect of President Trump sitting down with President Xi Jinping to actually talk about the difficulties between those two countries. I'm not here to make a judgment as to who's right or who's wrong on that, but the fact is that the world will breathe a sigh of relief if something material and constructive comes out of that discussion. And that shows just how important investment and trade can be. Well, that's enough from me. I'm going to pass over straight away to the Honourable Angelina Tenney from South Sudan to give us her insight into this.
This is very unusual for me. I'm usually kind of nervous. I'm usually never nervous, when I'm about to speak in front of an audience like yourself. But I have been challenged since yesterday, and I don't know whether I'll live up to, what has been staged here. It has been an amazing experience since yesterday and up to today, and I hope what I will have to say will contribute a little bit to the story of, let me call it, restoring dignity to humanity. I saw the heading today, it was about trade, and I was thinking, am I not misplaced in this presentation? But all the same, I'll make an attempt. I may go off a little bit and not follow suit the kind of presentations that were given, because I would like to tell you a little bit of a story of the youngest country in the world, and with the hope that you may be able to define a role for yourself in shaping that youngest country to become the kind of country that not only its people aspired for, but also what motivated the world to give it the support and the goodwill that enable us to become a young country. South Sudan was born not just out of the struggle of its people, but because of the contribution and the goodwill of others internationally. Today we are a nation, and that nation, when it was presented to there was a unanimous vote, including the country we seceded from. In fact, they were the first to recognize. And I want to take this opportunity to actually thank the Sudan and its government then for making that possible. course of late, all you hear is the tragedy of war, the tragedy of human suffering, displacement, refugees, and worst of all, stories of abuses such as rape of women, basically stripping the people of that country of their dignity. And when I was listening yesterday, I thought investing in bringing about the end of all of that in South Sudan would be investing in humanity. And that's why I really want to thank World Humanitarian Drive and all their partners, including the Universal Peace Federation, for this opportunity for me to be able to at least say something little. South Sudan in 2011, we achieved overwhelmingly a vote to secede from the Republic of Sudan. But before that, we were kind of embroiled in Africa's longest civil war. And that was the struggle for independence. That Africa's longest civil war, the story, the official story will tell you that it was over about 30 years. But we struggled for nearly 100 years to attain this independence. Why am I going back to that? We single-mindedly struggled to become an entity. I want you to appreciate the determination of the people of the Republic of South Sudan. And it is my belief that with that same zeal and that same determination and that same focus of wanting exactly or knowing exactly what you want will also help us to move from where we are now to a place where our people can be happy, can feel dignified and respected, are able to develop, are able to exploit and explore the riches that the Almighty has actually afforded them. Because South Sudan is a very rich country, like most African countries, in natural resources. You name it. You may only know of the oil because that has been explored. But the gold, which is being illegally mined as we speak, and more often than not using traditional methods, which is also destructive to the environment, the land, the wildlife, you name it, it's there. It's actually heaven on earth. But we as human beings is managed in one way or another to turn it into something which is almost hell to some people who live in it. So with that determination, I believe that we will move from that, and with the hope and the very same support that we had from the global community, that story will change. This is my trust, this is my hope, this is what I work for. What happened? 2011, we gained independence. We began a discourse on what is it that we want this nation to look like. What should be the nation of it? How should it be governed? What should be our slogan? What should be our national anthem? What should be included in our national anthem? By the way, our national anthem, if you hear it, it's almost a hymn. Yeah. It starts by, oh God, we thank and glorify you And
Say it to us.
I have a horrible voice. Yeah. But we'll try to get it out. We'll try and find it, and then we hear it later. It's a beautiful national anthem. And the words in that national anthem, it speaks to our aspirations as a people. Now the question we ask ourselves, what have we done to fulfill those words in our national anthem? And we're reflecting. Personally, I reflect as an individual because I have my own responsibilities, but also how do I, as a single in the bigger community, make this reflection that I have to have a ripple effect so that others also can think the same way, and collectively so that we move in that direction. In that discourse, things went hayway because people have different ideas. You know, oh, we don't need to change anything, let us just step into these institutions and we move on. Remember, these are institutions we fought to change for nearly 100 years. Others were saying, no, we need to really rethink this. Is this what we want? Is it just so that we are called a republic? So how should we govern ourselves? Oh, we want a federal state whereby we devolve the powers and resources closer to the people. Oh, no, we want a centralized system where, because our people are still uneducated and so on, and we cannot trust them to govern themselves. So, before you know it, the whole thing turned violent. And you know the rest of the story. As that violence continued, we never ceased to engage one another. As I speak here, I'm in opposition to the government in the country. But we have just signed a peace accord. And right now, I just came from Juba, South Sudan, engaged in the implementation of that peace accord that we have signed. This peace accord was signed initially in 2015, but it collapsed in 2016. I'm not going to go into that story. We continued engaging. In September of 2019, we signed another one, and we now call it the revitalized peace agreement. It is likely holding the cessation of hostilities, likely holding. We have embarked on the implementation. What role am I playing? I actually share a board. This board is mandated by the agreement. This board is called the Strategic Defense and Security Sector Review Board. It's mandated by the agreement to actually work, reform, not necessarily reform, actually the formation of the new security sector. It's an overhaul. So this is what I'm engaged in. You can imagine, in a masculine world of security, how tough that work is. I was discussing with my brother Ali earlier from Bahrain, and he was telling me that the vision or the mandate that had been given to you by this agreement is almost impossible in the short time we are given to actually achieve it. But I can't afford to think like that. I can only afford to think that by the end of this pre-transition, I would have a new, unified, organized force in place, whether it be the National Army for the Republic of South Sudan, the National Police Service, national security, with the kinds of ideals that the agreement also provided. Because the agreement actually has given us what you would call address the political issues that we were struggling over. It also gives us an opportunity to embark on the making of a permanent constitution, which will allow us to address issues of governance, systems, institutional reforms, and what have you. In fact, the agreement also gives us a long list of reforms to be undertaken. I just spoke about the security sector, the economic sector, and I just want to take a pause there. The economic sector includes the financial systems and what have you or not. This, in fact, we are already looking at the laws and reforming them. This will enable, because we're talking about trade here and investment, will enable others actually, or us to begin to look into the development in those other sectors. People have been always weary, people with money. There's a saying in Arabic, Ras al-Mal Jabal. I don't know how to translate that. The capital is a coward. So the capital wants security before it can travel to go somewhere. It wants to make sure that you have certain systems in place and insurances so that when I put my money, I should get a return for it, and so on. So with those policies that we're working on, the idea is to encourage investment, to encourage others to come and support us, instead of us always asking for, can you fund this, can you fund that, we need support here, we need support there. We can tell you, what, why don't you come? We have this sector, let's say, now that the security is getting stabilized and we are moving on to the reforms, you can bring your money, we don't even want to see the color of the money, just bring it and invest it and do something. And this is my thinking. They're difficult, but my belief is that God never gives you anything in your plate unless it capacitates you to be able to address it.
Right.
Yeah.